The autumn chill seeped into the stones of Westminster Abbey, the kind of cold that settled in the joints and made candle flames tremble. The air carried a mingling of incense and damp, the faint scent of wet wool rising from the cloaks of the assembled nobility. In the half-light, colored beams from the stained glass windows painted fractured rainbows on the flagstones. You are a priest that morning in 1396, standing at the side of the altar, prayer book in hand. Weddings you have blessed before, yes, many, but nothing like this. The court's whispers had been growing for weeks, each rumor more incredulous than the last. And now, as the great oak doors swing open, reality proves more extraordinary than any whisper. King Richard II strides in, tall, broad-shouldered, his golden hair catching the fractured sunlight like threads of flame. His every step carries the weight of ceremony, yet there is a softness to his expression today. And at his side, holding his gloved hand, is a girl so small her head barely reaches his elbow. 6 years old, perhaps? 7. Her gown of French silk trails far beyond her tiny frame, its embroidered lilies shimmering with each hesitant step. Pearls, almost as large as her eyes, are woven into her dark braids, their weight making her neck bend ever so slightly forward. You steady yourself. This child is Isabella of Valois, daughter of King Charles VI of France, brought here to seal not just a marriage, but a fragile hope. Peace between two kingdoms locked in bitter war for more than half a century. The 100 Years' War has taken its toll. Fields burned, villages emptied, treasuries drained. The Great Plague is still within living memory, a shadow on every heart. You know well that in such a world, alliances are not forged by parchment alone. Marriage is the truest signature of a treaty written in human lives. Richard kneels slightly as they reach the altar, his gloved hand enveloping hers. His gaze is not the gaze of a man coveting a young bride. No, his eyes carry something closer to protectiveness, as though he is making a vow beyond what the church demands. The court knows this union will not be consummated. She will grow here, learn here, until she reaches womanhood. But appearances matter, and in this age, a crowned queen, even a child, wields symbolic power enough to shift the course of nations. As you intone the opening prayers, you notice Isabella's face, curiosity lighting her wide eyes as she studies the abbey's soaring arches, the endless flicker of candles, the rustle of silks in the pews. There is no fear in her, only the alertness of one who understands she has stepped into a story larger than herself. The vows pass in a gentle rhythm. Richard's voice, measured and steady, carries in the vaulted space. When it is her turn, the girl speaks softly, the French lilt in her voice curling around the Latin phrases she has rehearsed. Outside, in the streets of London, the people wait for news. They will hear not of romance, but of a truce, of the hope that this child might be the bridge between two warring crowns. When you bless them, your voice is even, yet your heart feels an unfamiliar weight. Before you, a man of nearly 30 and a girl not yet in her second decade are bound together for the sake of kingdoms. And as you pronounce them husband and wife, you cannot help but wonder, when she is grown, what will remain of the peace she now embodies? Will it endure? Or will this day, in time, be remembered only as a pause before the storm? Outside, bells begin to toll, their sound echoing across the Thames. A new Queen of England walks from the Abbey steps, her small figure swallowed in the folds of gold cloth, holding tightly to the hand of a king who knows, perhaps better than anyone, that peace is the most delicate crown of all. Part 2. A child of the French court. The Louvre Palace in Paris in the late 14th century was a world of contrasts, a fortress of stone and gilded halls, a place where marble staircases echoed with the laughter of courtiers, but also with hurried footsteps when tempers flared. Here, on a cold November day in 1389, Isabella of Valois first drew breath. She was born into the most illustrious and most troubled household in France. Her father, King Charles VI, could be as radiant and affectionate as the sun in spring, or as terrifying as a storm sweeping in from the north. Chroniclers would later call him Charles the Mad, though when his mind was clear, he ruled with the grace and decisiveness of a true king. But when the episodes came, they could last for weeks or months, turning the court into a theater of whispered warnings and hidden eyes. As a toddler, Isabella knew the soft leather of her father's gloves as he bounced her on his knee in moments of lucidity. But she also knew the sight of those same gloves flung to the floor as he raved about assassins creeping through the corridors. There were days when he would stare through her as though she were a stranger, or stand frozen, convinced that his body was made of glass and might shatter with the slightest touch. The courtiers learned to read the warning signs, the far-off stare, the restless pacing, and in those moments they would gently lead the royal children away. In the nursery, behind heavy oak doors, Isabella would hear the muffled shouts from the audience chambers. The wet nurse would hum a lullaby, but the notes often trembled. If her father was the unpredictable heart of the court, her mother, Isabeau of Bavaria, was its calculating mind. Beautiful and poised, she navigated the treacherous currents of French politics with an instinct sharpened by necessity. She understood that her children, especially Isabella, the eldest daughter, were more than beloved offspring. They were bargaining pieces in the high-stakes game of European power. Isabeau's gaze could be warm, even tender, but always assessing. She knew that beauty and lineage in a daughter could open doors no army could breach. From an early age, Isabella's attire was chosen with the precision of a diplomat's seal. Silks from Italy, pearls from the Channel coast, and embroidery worked in the royal colors of France. The child herself was gentle by nature, but quick-eyed, absorbing the subtle signals in a room, the tightening of a jaw, the shift of a fan, the lowering of a voice. Beyond the palace walls, France was a kingdom fraying under the weight of war. For over 60 years, the English and French had bled each other dry in the 100 Years' War. Villages along the borders were nothing more than charred husks. Roads that once carried merchants now saw only the boots of soldiers and the hooves of mounted knights. The war had begun over a disputed crown, but had grown into something darker, a battle for identity, for dominance, for survival itself. In Paris, whispers of the devastation reached the palace through petitioners and letters. Isabella, still a child, would hear her mother discuss the latest campaign, while ladies embroidered quietly in the corner. She would watch her father, during his lucid days, pore over maps with his advisors, tracing frontiers with his finger. She may not have understood the strategies, but she felt the weight in the room, the urgency that pressed on every conversation. Her own world, while cocooned in luxury, was never far from danger. The Louvre's outer walls were thick, but no fortress could guard against famine, plague, or the shifting loyalties of allies. Servants told stories of the Black Death that had swept through just 50 years before, halving the population. Some spoke of omens, comets, eclipses, and bad harvests, signs, they said, that the kingdom's troubles would not soon end. For Isabella, childhood was not a gradual journey, but a series of sudden awakenings. One day, she would be playing with a carved wooden horse in the nursery. The next, she would be ushered into a reception hall to greet a visiting ambassador. Her small hand would be guided into his, her mother's voice smooth as silk as she introduced the jewel of France. She began to understand that her smile, her curtsy, her very presence could be a weapon in the arsenal of her family's ambitions. And yet, for all the calculation around her, Isabella retained a softness. She loved the palace gardens in spring when lilacs bloomed against the gray Paris walls, She delighted in the miniature spaniel gifted to her by a Burgundian cousin, chasing it through the colonnades until her nurse scolded her for scuffing her gown. These moments of innocence were her refuge, fragile interludes in a life that was already being shaped by forces far older and harder than she could grasp. She was too young to know that her fate was already being considered in council chambers, that her name was spoken in the same breath as treaty and alliance. But the day would come soon when she would be asked to leave behind the gardens, the nursery, and the familiar corridors of the Louvre, to step into a role no child could fully understand, yet one that history would remember.